The Valari Empire stretched across many star systems. They were tall, proud, and cold in their hearts. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved many species. To them, humans were nothing but weak creatures from a small blue planet. The Valari soldiers often mocked humans, calling them fragile and useless. They never expected anything from them except obedience. Among the Valari lived Princess Lyra. She was once seen as a jewel of the royal line, but her value had been broken long ago. The doctors of the Empire declared her infertile when she was still young. In a culture where bloodlines were everything, this became her curse. No suitor wished to claim her. No noble wished to protect her. She was a princess only in name, kept in the palace like a forgotten ornament. The Empire enjoyed cruel jokes when they captured humans in one of their raids. They thought of a new way to mock both the humans and the unlucky princess. They chose one human prisoner and gave Lyra to him as a false gift. They laughed as they made the announcement before the court. This human is weak, yet let him have what none of us desire. The High Lord sneered. Take the infertile princess. Perhaps the little creature will believe he has been honored. The crowd laughed at the sight. To the Valari, it was a grand jest. To Lyra, it was another wound upon her heart. She stood silent, her head lowered, unable to resist. To Aaron, the human chosen, it was something else entirely. Aaron was not a soldier or a leader. He was an ordinary man caught in the wrong place when the Valari attacked. He had watched his people taken away in chains, and he himself had been dragged into the depths of the alien ship. Life in captivity had taught him silence and patience. When the princess was placed before him, he said no words. He only bowed his head slightly. As if accepting a task, the Valari roared with laughter. To them, his quietness was the proof of weakness. They thought the human was too dull to even understand the insult. Lyra was placed into his keeping, and they were both led away to a small chamber at the edge of the palace. Lyra sat on a stone seat, her golden eyes staring at the wall. She did not speak. She did not look at Aaron. She thought she had been punished again, this time by being handed to a creature unworthy of her bloodline. She believed he would treat her as the Valari. Nobles had always treated her with mockery or indifference. Aaron, however, did not mock. He placed his small portion of food before her. When she refused to eat, he pushed it closer with a calm hand. You need strength, he said softly. She looked at him in surprise. The Valari never spoke in such a tone. Their voices were always sharp, filled with command or scorn. This human voice was different. She turned her face away. But later, when he was not looking, she ate the food. Days passed in this quiet manner. Aaron never forced her to do anything. He never shouted. He shared everything equally, even when rations were low. He slept on the cold floor, leaving the single blanket for her. At first she thought he did this because he feared her title, but soon she realized he simply wished her to be warm. Her heart was confused. She had grown up among proud warriors and cold nobles. None had ever cared for her comfort. Even her own family had turned away when the truth of her infertility was known. Yet here was a human prisoner, a man with no power and no freedom, showing her more respect than she had ever known. One evening, when the guards had gone and the palace was quiet, she asked him a question. Why do you act this way? You know who I am. You know I cannot give what others expect. Why do you show me kindness? Aaron lifted his gaze to her. His eyes were weary, but steady. Because you are alone, he answered, and so am I. The words struck her deeper than she expected. For the first time in many years, she felt her chest tighten, not from sorrow, but from something different. She did not speak again that night, but she lay awake long after he had fallen asleep on the floor. As the weeks turned into months, a bond began to grow between them. It was not quick, nor was it easy. Lyra carried the weight of shame and rejection, and Aaron carried the burden of captivity. Yet in their small chamber, they found comfort in sharing simple things. He told her stories of earth, of wide rivers, and green fields. She told him of her childhood before the doctors gave their judgment, of days when she still felt like a true princess. Each story became a stone in the bridge between them. slowly. Lyra began to smile again, though only when they were alone, slowly. Aaron began to feel less like a prisoner and more like a man who still had purpose. The Valari nobles did not care. To them, the joke had already passed. They no longer visited to laugh at the pair. They believed nothing could ever come from this union. They believed the princess was broken, and the human was nothing. But deep inside their small chamber, something unseen was beginning to grow. It was not yet a child, not yet a miracle, but a quiet seed of trust. Aaron and Lyra had been given to each other as part of a cruel game. Yet they were learning that even in chains, kindness could plant hope. What the Valari had thrown away in scorn, humanity had begun to cherish in silence, and though no one in the Empire could see it yet, the gift meant as a joke would one day return as the greatest surprise in their proud history. The chamber where Lyra and Aaron lived was small compared to the great halls of the Valari Palace. Its walls were made of cold stone, its windows narrow, and the light that entered was faint. To the proud Valari, this place was nothing more than a forgotten corner for their forgotten princess and her strange companion. Yet for Aaron and Lyra, it became the place where the lonely souls began to change each other's lives. At first, Lyra kept her distance. She believed the kindness Aaron showed her was a mask. In her world, kindness was often a trick used to gain control. Nobles had smiled at her when she was young, only to turn away once they heard she could never bear children. She expected Aaron to reveal the same cruelty once he grew tired of pretending. But days passed, and his actions never changed. When the guards brought them food, Aaron always divided it evenly. If the pieces were unequal, he gave the larger portion to her. When the air at night grew colder, he folded the blanket round her shoulders while he rested against the hard floor. If she wished to sit in silence, he did not press her to speak. If she wished to talk, he listened with patience. It confused her. He was a human, and humans were supposed to be weak. Yet she began to notice strength in him, not the kind the Valari measured with weapons or power, but the strength to endure without bitterness. He had been torn from his world, enslaved, and mocked. Yet he did not allow hatred to poison his heart. One evening, Lyra asked him about Earth. She had heard of the planet only through Valari reports, which described it as unremarkable. To the Empire, it was a world of little value, a place conquered without effort. Yet when Aaron spoke, his voice carried warmth. It has skies that change colors when the sun rises and falls, he said. Blue in the day, red and gold in the evening, rivers that run wide, and fields that stretch as far as the eye can see. It is not the largest world, but it is home. Lyra closed her eyes, trying to imagine such skies. Her own world was covered with towering spires and dark metal cities, built to show the might of the Empire. Beauty was measured by scale, not by peace. She had never seen open rivers or wide fields. And your people, she asked, do they honor you? Aaron smiled faintly. Not honor. We live as families, as neighbors, as friends. We are not perfect, but we try to care for each other. That is what makes us strong. The words lingered in her mind long after he finished. Strength, to her people, had always meant conquest. To him, it meant care. It was such a simple idea, yet it felt like a truth she had never known. In return, she began to share her own memories. She spoke of the palace garden she once visited as a child, where rare flowers grew under glass domes. She told him of the vast throne hall where her father ruled with iron command. And finally, she told him of the day the doctors gave their judgment. They said I was useless to the Empire, she whispered. They said I could not give life. My father stopped looking at me. My brothers stopped speaking to me. From that day, I was no longer a true princess, only a shadow. Aaron did not laugh, nor did he pity her. He only said, you are not a shadow to me. Her throat tightened. She turned away, but those words struck deep within her. No one in her empire had ever spoken to her with such honesty. Days turned to weeks. Slowly she grew less silent. Sometimes she even smiled when Aaron told her stories of foolish things he had done in his youth. She began to look forward to the evenings when the palace quieted, when the two of them could speak without interruption. The bond that formed between them was quiet and fragile, but it was real. The guards noticed the change. They teased her whenever they delivered food, mocking the way she listened to the human. But she no longer bowed her head in shame. She answered calmly, refusing to let their scorn wound her. Aaron's presence had given her a kind of shield she had never known before. One night, when the cold was sharp and the air was heavy with silence, Lyra asked him another question. Why do you never hate me? I am part of the people who took you from your home. I am part of those who keep you prisoner. Why do you not despise me as you should? Aaron looked at her with steady eyes. Because you are not the Empire. You are you, and you have been hurt by them as well. Why should I add more pain when we already carry enough? Lyra's heart trembled. She thought of all the years she had been judged for something she could not change. She thought of how easily the Valari cast aside those who did not fit their standards, and now here was a human, a man her people called weak, who saw her as more than her curse. That night she could not sleep. She lay awake, listening to the quiet breathing of the human who rested only a few steps away. For the first time in her life, she wondered if fate had not cursed her, but instead given her a strange chance. The Empire still believed the joke was over. The lords no longer paid attention. They saw nothing but two forgotten figures in a stone chamber. Yet within those walls something stronger than cruelty was being built. It was not power. It was not conquest. It was something simple, yet something the Valari had never understood. It was trust. It was care. And slowly, it was becoming something even greater. The Valari palace was always alive with noise. Warriors trained in the great halls. Nobles held endless feasts, and servants hurried through the corridors. Yet inside the small stone chamber where Aaron and Lyra lived, time moved differently. It was quiet there, almost peaceful, and each day that passed pulled them closer together. Lyra had grown used to sharing her life with Aaron. She no longer saw him as a stranger or a prisoner. His presence had become a comfort, something steady. In a world that had always shifted beneath her feet, she found herself speaking more freely, even laughing at times. Her heart, once heavy with shame, felt lighter when she was with him. But then came the change she never expected. It began with weariness. Lyra felt her strength fading even though she had eaten well. At first she thought it was the cold air of the chamber, or perhaps the endless gloom of palace life. Yet as days turned to weeks, she noticed more signs. Her body felt different. Her heart beat faster. And deep inside, she felt a strange warmth she could not explain. One evening she sat on the stone bench with her head in her hands. Aaron watched her with concern. You are unwell, he said gently. Tell me what troubles you. She lifted her eyes to him, fear trembling in her voice. I think something is happening to me, something that should not be possible. He waited in silence, giving her the space to find her words. I feel life inside me, she whispered. I feel it growing, but it cannot be. The doctors told me long ago that I was barren. They said I could never carry a child. Aaron's eyes widened, but he did not laugh or doubt her. He leaned closer, his voice calm and steady. If you feel it, then it is real. Perhaps they were wrong. Perhaps this is a gift you were never meant to expect. Lyra shook her head, tears forming in her golden eyes. You do not understand. The Valari declared me broken. They used that word all my life. To them, my worth ended the day they gave their judgment. If this is true, if there is life within me, then everything they said was a lie. Aaron reached out and placed his hand over hers. Then let their lies fall away. You are not broken. You never were. Her tears spilled, but this time they were not born of sorrow. She had lived so long believing she was empty that her body had failed her. Now, for the first time, she felt a spark of hope. Days later, her fear became certainty. Her body changed. Further, and the truth could no longer be hidden. She was carrying life. The news spread when one of the palace physicians was sent to inspect her. The physician returned pale and shaken, unable to believe what he had seen. Soon the whispers filled the halls of the Empire. The infertile princess, the one they had cast aside, was with child, and the father was a human. The court erupted in fury. and disbelief. Some nobles called it a trick. Others demanded the child be destroyed, fearing it would shame the empire. The high lords gathered in the throne hall, their voices rising in outrage. "This is an insult to our bloodline," one thundered. "The child cannot be allowed to live. It is an abomination," another cried, "a mix of weak flesh and broken spirit." Yet there were also voices of fear. "If such a union is possible," some whispered, "then what does it mean for the strength of the empire?" While the court argued, Aaron and Lyra remained in their chamber. Guards watched them more closely now, but Aaron never left her side. When fear struck her, he calmed her. When doubt returned, he reminded her that the life within her was real and precious. At night, when the palace quieted, Lyra placed her hand on her stomach and whispered softly, "I was told you would never exist. I was told I could never be your mother. But you are here, and I will protect you." Aaron listened, his heart heavy with both pride and worry. He knew the empire would not accept the child easily. Yet he also knew there was no force that could take away the truth of what had already begun. The Valari mocked humans as weak, but in his heart he felt a strength he had never known. The bond he shared with Lyra had brought forth life, something the empire said was impossible. No cruelty, no scorn, no decree could erase that miracle. In the following weeks, Lyra began to walk through the palace again. She held her head higher, no longer the shadow she once believed herself to be. The nobles glared, some with disgust, others with fear, but she did not bow to them. She was carrying the proof that their judgment had been false. The empire had given her away as a joke, yet she returned to their eyes with more power than she ever held before. She was a mother-to-be, and she was not alone. Aaron walked beside her, silent yet unshaken. Though he wore the chains of a prisoner, his spirit carried a dignity the Valari could not understand. Together they faced the sneers of the court, their hands brushing in quiet defiance. The High Lord who had once mocked her the loudest now stared with unease. "This cannot be allowed," he muttered, yet in his eyes there was fear. For even the proudest Valari knew that life could not be denied. The impossible had become reality. The infertile princess carried a child. The human mocked as weak had fathered it. The news of Lyra's pregnancy spread through the empire like fire through dry grass. What had begun as whispers in the palace soon reached the outer halls, then the barracks, then the markets. Everyone spoke of it. The infertile princess, long mocked as useless, carried a child, and not just any child, but one whose father was a human slave. The nobles were outraged. To them, the royal bloodline was sacred. It was the source of their pride and their right to rule. To think that human blood now flowed in the veins of a future heir was an insult. They could not bear. The High Council gathered in the Grand Throne Hall. The hall was vast, with pillars that reached toward the ceiling like stone spears. The air was heavy with anger, and voices clashed in a storm of fury. "This cannot be permitted," one lord declared. "If the child is born, our bloodline will be forever stained." Another added, "The humans are weak. If we allow this, our enemies will laugh at us. The very foundation of our empire will crumble." Others were more fearful. "If the princess truly carries life when our doctors swore she could not, then this is a power we do not understand. Perhaps it is dangerous to us all." The emperor himself, a tall and severe figure, listened in silence. His golden crown glimmered under the light, but his face was dark with thought. At last he spoke, and his voice silenced the chamber. "Bring the princess before us. Let her answer." Guards were sent, and soon Lyra entered the throne hall with Aaron at her side. The nobles whispered and sneered at the sight of him, a human walking beside a Valari princess. Chains still hung from his wrists, yet his steps were firm. Lyra stood before the throne, her hand resting over her stomach. She felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. Yet for the first time she did not feel small. "You were declared barren," the emperor said coldly. "You were given away because you were of no use to us, and now you claim to carry life. Explain this." "I do not claim," Lyra answered, her voice steady. "I carry the child within me. You may test me again, and the truth will remain. What you believed impossible is now real." A wave of murmurs filled the hall. Some nobles shouted in anger, others in disbelief. The emperor's eyes narrowed. And the father? He asked. Aaron stepped forward. Though the guards moved as if to restrain him, his voice was calm. The child is mine. The hall erupted in outrage. Voices shouted above one another. Blasphemy. Abomination. This cannot be. The emperor raised his hand, and silence fell once more. His gaze moved from Aaron to Lyra. You shame us. You bring dishonor to our line. What do you expect us to do? Lyra lifted her chin. I expect you to see truth. All my life I was called broken. You cast me aside. But this life within me proves that I am not what you said. It proves that your judgments are not perfect. Her words stung. No one had ever spoken so boldly before the throne, not even the nobles. Yet she spoke with a fire that could not be denied. The emperor's face darkened. You dare defy us. Aaron stepped closer to her side. She speaks the truth. You gave her away as a joke. You thought nothing would come of it. Yet here she stands, carrying the future. No cruelty of yours can erase that. The hall trembled. With rage, nobles demanded Aaron's death. Some called for the child to be destroyed before it could be born. Others insisted Lyra should be locked away forever. But not all voices joined the anger. A few nobles remained silent, their eyes thoughtful. The empire valued strength. And here before them stood a woman once scorned, now filled with new power. Some wondered if the child might indeed be a sign, not of weakness, but of change. The emperor rose from his throne. His robes flowed like shadows as he descended the steps. He stopped before Lyra and stared down at her. You have brought danger to this empire, he said. Your child will divide us. But know this, princess, no matter what you believe, no matter what you hope, the empire will not fall because of a human. We will decide the fate of your child, not you. Lyra met his gaze without flinching. You may command armies, you may rule stars, but you cannot command life. This child is mine. This child will live. Her voice rang through the hall like a clear bell. For a moment, even the emperor hesitated. Then he turned and returned to his throne. Take them back to their chamber, he ordered. We will decide soon. Guards led them away. The nobles argued again, their voices rising. But Aaron and Lyra walked with steady steps, though chains bound Aaron and threats surrounded them both. Neither felt broken. Back in their chamber, Lyra sank onto the stone bench. Her hands trembled, though she had stood firm before the court. Aaron knelt beside her. You were brave, he said softly. She shook her head. I was only honest. For too long I allowed them to name me as they wished. Today I spoke for myself. Aaron placed his hand over hers. And you spoke not just for yourself, but for the child as well. No matter what they plan, we will protect this life. Fear still lingered in her heart, for she knew the empire's wrath was not easily turned aside. Yet hope burned brighter now than ever before. She was no longer the forgotten princess. She was a mother, and she was not alone. Outside their chamber, the empire raged. The nobles plotted. The emperor brooded, and the people whispered. Some saw the child as a curse, others as a miracle. The empire was no longer united in its scorn. A crack had formed, and through that crack light began to shine. The wrath of the empire was heavy, but it could not silence the truth. The impossible had happened, and no power in the galaxy could change that. The days that followed the trial in the throne hall were filled with tension. Guards watched Lyra and Aaron more closely than before, and whispers followed them wherever they went. Some servants looked at Lyra with disgust, others with quiet wonder, but none dared to speak openly. The empire waited for the emperor's final decision. Yet no order came. It was as if the ruler himself feared what would happen if he commanded the death of the child. Inside the chamber, Lyra's body changed. More each day. Her steps grew slower. Her strength was often drained, but her spirit rose higher. She no longer carried herself as the forgotten princess. She walked as a mother, with one hand always resting over her growing stomach. Aaron stayed close to her, sighed, never letting her face the long nights alone. You must not tire yourself, Aaron said often, guiding her to sit when he saw her grow pale. Lyra would smile faintly. I am not weak. I carry strength inside me now, perhaps more than I ever had before. When she said those words, Aaron could see the truth in her eyes. She had been called useless all her life, yet now she carried the greatest proof that she was far more than her people believed. The Empire, however, did not share in her joy. The High Council remained divided. Some demanded action, insisting the unborn child was a threat to their bloodline. Others whispered in shadows, saying that perhaps this was a sign of destiny. The Empire had grown cold and cruel, feeding on fear and conquest. Perhaps the arrival of this child meant a new future. The Emperor did not speak of his final decision. He gave no command to destroy the child, but neither did he offer protection. Lyra and Aaron lived under constant watch, uncertain whether the next day would bring safety or doom. And yet, within that uncertainty, life pushed forward. The night of birth came without warning. A storm swept over the capital city, lightning striking the sky while thunder shook the towers. In the small chamber, Lyra cried out as the pain began. The guards, alarmed, summoned the palace physicians. Aaron held her hand tightly, his face pale but steady. You are not alone, he whispered to her. You will not face this alone. Her strength faltered as the hours passed, but she did not give up. She had carried shame all her life, yet now she carried hope. That hope burned brighter than the pain. Aaron never let go of her hand, speaking to her, steadying her when fear rose. At last, with one final cry, the chamber was filled with the sound of a newborn's voice. The physicians, once doubtful, now stared in awe. In Lyra's arms lay a child, small yet strong, its eyes bright with life. Lyra wept as she looked upon her child. All the years of sorrow, all the years of being called barren and broken, melted away. She was a mother. Her child lived, and nothing in the Empire could take that truth away. Aaron leaned close, his eyes shining. Our child, he said softly, proof that even in chains, hope can be born. News of the birth spread quickly. Through the palace, servants whispered, guards exchanged nervous looks, and nobles rushed to the throne hall to hear the emperor's judgment. For the first time in generations, the empire was shaken not by war, but by the cry of a newborn child. The emperor summoned Lyra and Aaron to appear before the council once again. This time Lyra did not walk as a shamed princess. She entered the throne hall carrying her child, her head held high. Aaron walked beside her, no longer just a prisoner in chains, but the father of a miracle. The nobles fell silent as they looked upon the child. Its small form, its bright eyes, and its healthy cry silenced their anger. No one could deny what they saw. The impossible had become real. The emperor's face was hard to read. His eyes studied the child with both fear and fascination. He spoke, slowly, each word heavy. The princess once shamed this empire with her weakness. Yet before us she now carries proof of life, a child of two worlds, born from what we believe was impossible. Perhaps it is a curse, perhaps a blessing. Only time will tell. A noble shouted from the side, we cannot let this child live. It will divide us. Another answered, or it may unite us. Look at the strength of the princess. Look at the resolve of the human. There is more power here than we thought. The hall broke into arguments, but Lyra's voice rose above them all. This child is not shame. This child is not weakness. This child is proof that life cannot be crushed by cruelty. You gave me away as a joke, yet I return as a mother. And no matter what you say, no matter what you decide, this child will live. If you wish to destroy it, you will have to destroy me as well. The hall fell into silence. Even the emperor hesitated at such bold words. In her arms the child stirred, its small hands curling as if in defiance. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt truly strong. Not because of her bloodline, not because of her title, but because she had brought forth new life when everyone said she could not. The empire could no longer erase her. That night, as they returned to their chamber, Aaron and Lyra sat together with their child between them. The storm outside had passed, and a calm filled the air. Lyra touched the child's cheek gently. All my life I thought I was cursed, but you are proof that I was wrong. You are the hope I never thought I would hold." Aaron nodded, and hope is stronger than any empire. In the days that followed, the palace changed. Servants whispered with wonder instead of scorn. Some guards, once cruel, now bowed their heads when they passed. Even among the nobles, doubt began to grow. The empire had given away what it thought was worthless, yet it had returned as the most valuable gift of all. The birth of the child was more than a miracle. It was a spark that lit fires in hearts long cold, a spark that whispered of change in a place ruled by fear, a spark that no emperor, no council, and no army could put out. It was the birth of hope. The birth of the child shook the Valari Empire in ways no battle had ever done. What the High Lords had meant as a cruel jest had become the seed of something greater. In every corner of the palace, in every street of the capital city, people whispered about the child of the infertile princess and the human prisoner. At first the whispers were soft. Servants spoke in hidden corners, wondering if the child was a sign from fate. Soldiers who once mocked humans began to glance with uncertain respect at Aaron. Even among the nobles, a few voices dared to question whether the empire's pride had blinded them to a new truth. For Lyra, each day with her child was a victory. She no longer felt the weight of shame. Instead, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Where once she avoided the eyes of others, now she walked through the palace with her head high, the child cradled in her arms. Those who once called her broken now saw a mother who had defied their scorn. Aaron stood beside her at every step. He was still bound by chains, yet his presence no longer seemed like that of a prisoner. To many he appeared as something more, a protector whose calm strength shone brighter than the proud arrogance of Valari lords. He did not boast, he did not demand, yet his resolve was clear to all who looked at him. The empire was unsettled. The High Council met often, their arguments fierce and endless. Some demanded the child's removal, fearing that its very existence threatened the purity of their line. Others argued that the empire could not deny a miracle so clear before their eyes. The emperor listened but did not decide, perhaps because even he feared the storm that would follow either choice. Outside the council, change grew like fire in dry grass. Slaves from many worlds looked to Lyra and Aaron with new hope. If a human could stand equal with a princess, then perhaps the chains of others could also be broken. Even some Valari commoners began to question the cruelty of their rulers. For generations they had been told that strength meant domination. Yet here was a child born from love, a child who carried both human endurance and Valari pride. One evening, as the palace slept, Lyra sat with Aaron in their chamber. The child rested in her arms, its breathing soft and steady. She looked at Aaron with thoughtful eyes. "Do you see what is happening?" she asked. "They gave me to you as an insult, but now the empire itself is trembling because of what we have created." Aaron nodded slowly. "I see it. Your people are beginning to question what they once believed. They see that humanity is not weak. They see that kindness and care can build more strength than cruelty ever did." Lyra's gaze fell to the child. "He is the proof. When I look at him, I know that no empire, no throne, no crown can deny his right to live. He is the rising flame they cannot extinguish." Their words were not lost. Unknown to them, even some guards who stood outside their chamber began to repeat what they heard. Those words spread like sparks through the palace. Each retelling gave courage to those who had long remained silent. Days turned to weeks, and the child grew stronger. His laughter echoed in the cold halls, softening hearts that had once been hardened by years of conquest. Servants found themselves smiling when they passed, even when fear of the nobles tried to silence them. The empire's foundation was shaking, not by sword or rebellion, but by the simple truth of life itself. But not all welcomed the change. Among the High Council, the anger of the old lords grew sharper. They saw the whispers, they heard the talk, and they feared the loss of their power. "If we do not act soon," one declared, "the people will turn against us. The child will become a symbol, and symbols are more dangerous than armies." Another shouted, "We should end this now. The princess and the human must be removed. The child erased before it grows stronger." Yet others warned, "To destroy them now will only make the people rise in anger. Already they doubt us. Already they see strength in what we call weakness. If we kill them, we may lose the empire itself. The emperor remained silent, his mind torn between fear and pride. He watched the child with his own eyes more than once, searching for weakness and finding none. He saw in the boy a spark that unsettled him, a spark that threatened to outshine the throne itself. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, the story spread farther. Traders carried the tale across star systems. Slaves on distant worlds heard of a human who fathered a child with a Valari princess, and they whispered of freedom. Even among conquered species, hope stirred where once only despair lived. In their small chamber, Lyra felt the weight of this growing flame. She knew danger still surrounded them, yet she also knew they could not turn back. She looked at Aaron one night and said, "They may try to destroy us, but they cannot destroy what we have already begun. Even if we fall, the fire will live on." Aaron answered with quiet certainty, "Then we will protect it as long as we can. Our child is not just ours. He belongs to every heart that believes change is possible." Those words stayed with her. She carried them in her heart as she walked through the palace with the child in her arms. Wherever she went, eyes followed, and whispers spread. She no longer feared those whispers. She welcomed them, for she knew each one was another spark of the rising flame. The empire had given her away as a joke. They had mocked her, called her barren, cast her aside. But now the empire trembled because of her. Not because she commanded armies, not because she held weapons, but because she carried the proof that life and love could not be denied. The rising flame had begun, and nothing in the empire could stop it. The palace of the Valari was no longer the same. The laughter of a child, bright and clear, filled its cold halls. Servants whispered with hope instead of fear. Guards paused in their routines to glance at the small figure of life that had turned the empire upside down. Even the nobles who once plotted behind closed doors could no longer ignore the truth. The emperor remained silent in his throne room, but the fire of change burned around him. He had watched Lyra walk through the palace with her child, watched the calm and strength of Aaron beside her. He had seen the courage of a human, mocked as weak, standing tall against generations of arrogance, and he understood, deep down, that the world had shifted in ways he could not command back. Outside the chamber, whispers became words, and words became murmurs that spread to the far corners of the empire. Humanity, once considered fragile, had proven its worth, not through armies, not through conquest, but through life and love. A child born against all odds had become the symbol of hope. Lyra had grown stronger. She carried herself with the dignity of a mother and the authority of someone who had survived scorn and judgment. Her golden eyes, once clouded with sorrow, now glimmered with fire. She had faced the empire's wrath, endured the laughter of nobles, and still she stood. The child in her arms was proof of every word she had spoken. Life, hope, and courage could never be denied. Aaron remained beside her, his chains removed after the emperor recognized that the boy's life could not be taken without undoing all. The empire's pride. He walked freely now, a human who had changed the course of Valari history. His quiet strength inspired many. Those who had once doubted humans began to see them as equals, worthy of respect and courage. The High Council could no longer argue with certainty. The child thrived, the princess endured, and the human father stood without fear. Every attempt to intimidate them had failed. The empire could not undo the truth of what they had witnessed. Some nobles tried to fight the change, calling for harsh measures and secret plans. But whispers and hope had already spread beyond control. Soldiers and citizens alike began to question the authority they once obeyed without question. They looked at Lyra and her child and felt a new kind of loyalty, not to the throne, but to life itself. One morning, the emperor called Lyra and Aaron to the grand balcony overlooking the capital city. The crowd below had gathered spontaneously, drawn by the story of the princess, the human, and the miraculous child. Their voices rose in cheers and wonder. The empire had not seen such unity and excitement in generations. Lyra held the child up, letting the crowd see the proof of what they had been told was impossible. The people erupted in applause, their voices carrying hope, admiration, and joy. Aaron stood beside her, proud but humble, knowing that they had achieved more than they had ever imagined. The emperor, standing behind them, finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. This child is more than a symbol. He is proof that life and courage cannot be destroyed by cruelty. He is proof that even those we consider weak may hold the greatest strength. The people cheered louder. The High Council, once united in anger, now sat in silence. They could no longer claim authority over what had happened. The empire had witnessed the triumph of life itself, and it had changed forever. Lyra lowered her gaze to the child in her arms. "You are not just our child," she whispered softly. "You are a beacon for everyone who has been told they are nothing. You are the hope that cannot be taken." Aaron placed a hand over hers, and together, we will protect that hope. No empire, no law, no ruler can destroy it now. In the days that followed, the Valari began to change. The soldiers treated the humans among them with respect. Nobles who once mocked the weak began to see the value of kindness and courage. And the people, inspired by what they had witnessed, began to hope for a future that was not ruled by fear, but by justice and care. The child grew quickly, strong and curious. Wherever Lyra and Aaron walked, people followed quietly, eager to see the boy who had altered the course of an empire. The small voice of one child had echoed louder than any army, louder than any decree. Even the emperor could not deny the truth. He watched Lyra with quiet admiration, realizing that she had become more than a princess. She was a leader, a mother, and a symbol of change. And Aaron, the human once mocked as weak, had shown courage beyond measure. Together they had achieved what no weapon could, the triumph of life, and hope over scorn and cruelty. One evening, as the sun set across the city, Lyra and Aaron stood on the balcony with their child. The sky glowed with golden and red hues, and the people below cheered and waved. The empire had been challenged, and the challenge had been met not with war, but with courage and love. The child in Lyra's arms stirred and laughed. Aaron smiled, bending down to kiss the small forehead. Lyra's eyes shone as she whispered, "You are the beginning of a new world. Your life has already changed everything." The empire, once rigid and unyielding, had begun to bend. The laughter of a child had pierced centuries of pride. The humans, once considered weak, had proven that courage, love, and hope could surpass the mightiest of empires. And in that moment, the Valari people, the humans, and every conquered species understood a truth long ignored. The strength of life is greater than the strength of conquest. The princess, once given away as a joke, now returned not as a victim, but as a mother, a symbol, and a force that would guide the empire toward a brighter future. The human, once seen as weak, now stood as the father of hope and proof that courage could defy any judgment. And the child, small but full of life, carried in his veins both human endurance and Valari spirit, would one day grow to remind the galaxy that even the smallest life can ignite the greatest flame. The world had changed. Humanity had triumphed. The empire would never be the same again.